right, grade 11s, I'm going to take up your homework from nutrition and enzymes and digestion. So the first thing I asked you, I'm just looking at my screen, I asked you about enzymes. So from Wednesday, May 20th, I said, what is an enzyme? Question 1 on the LMS page. An enzyme is a chemical that can break down nutrients, food into nutrients, or break down nutrients themselves. Okay, so it's involved in chemical digestion. What is the function of an enzyme? The function of an enzyme is to break your food down chemically, okay, and ultimately to break it into nutrients and then the building blocks of nutrients. And what 2 ways are enzymes specific to the reaction that they undergo? So this is an important question. I want you to know that enzymes are pH specific, so they're specific to the amount of acidity or basicity of a substance, and they are specific to the nutrient that they can react with. All right, and then that takes us over here now to question 1 on page 411. So it says, the trachea and the esophagus are located side by side. What mechanisms prevent food from entering the trachea and the lungs when swallowing? We have the epiglottis closing. Okay, so that's the very simplified answer there. You need to have that as part of your answer. Explain the mechanism that moves food through the gastrointestinal tract. That's peristalsis or peristalsis. All right, and that's the contraction of smooth muscle. What is the role of the stomach in digestion? So the stomach is involved in physical digestion because it's contracting. It's got those rough rugae inside. And it's involved in chemical digestion too because it has this hydrochloric acid which can begin to take apart proteins. And then it says, describe the structure of the stomach and how it relates to its function. It relates to function because of those rough rugae inside of the stomach. Strong acids can dissolve or chemically burn living matter. Why is the stomach tissue not damaged by stomach acid? Because it has a mucus covering, okay? So the acid layer doesn't eat through the mucus readily, and we always produce more mucus. So we keep that coating going. And describe the mechanism by which the stomach lining is protected from the very acidic gastric juice. So same answer, okay? And then question over here on page 420, I gave you question 1. So it says, name the sections of the small intestine and briefly describe the digestive process that occur in each. So you've got the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And if you've done some reading, you'll have quite a bit, but these are the things you need to focus on. You need to tell me that in the duodenum, that's where we get a lot of our enzymes being secreted from the pancreas. And we get that baking soda-like solution there to neutralize stomach acid. Okay, and then in the jejunum, you get a lot of chemical digestion. All right, so those enzymes are going to be at work. And then in the ileum, specifically in the ileum, you're going to have lots and lots of absorption. Okay, and so I'm going to lead into that question with this one here. I'm going to lead into question 2 with that answer. Describe the inside surface of the small intestine and explain the reason for this structure. So I want you to be able to tell me that there are villi in the inside of the intestine. So the inside of the intestine has these projections that come up. They're there so that we can increase absorption. So in the jejunum and the ileum, there are villi that are there to increase absorption, all right? Because that's really what you want to do. You want to digest your food and be able to absorb it into the red blood cells. Or not into the red blood cells, into the plasma. How does the structure of the small intestine relate to the mini... Okay, so we didn't do that, so I'm sorry I signed that. We don't need to worry about it. Question 3, explain the process that releases bile into the duodenum. So you have little sensors in your duodenum. Remember, that's the beginning of the small intestine. When fat enters the duodenum, it triggers the release of the gallbladder. So the gallbladder will actually contract and release bile because there are sensors for fat, okay? And then gallstones often develop in the gallbladder when minerals in the bile form into small pebble-like structures. This often requires the removal of the gallbladder. So what is the function of the gallbladder? It is to store bile. What might be the consequences of having your gallbladder removed? Remember this, you can still make bile because you have a liver, okay? It's just when it's on demand, like when you have something fatty, you've got your bile on demand, it'll just come out of the gallbladder. And so there'll be a little bit of a catch-up phase. You have to wait to make bile if you've had fat. So what my suggestion is that you probably would have to reduce the fat in your diet. Now, I've had many students who've said to me their mothers or their fathers have had their gallbladder removed, and they really haven't made major adjustments in their diet. So I can't tell you for sure that there's a major consequence, but again, in my opinion, if you don't have a gallbladder, you don't have bile on hand, and so you'd probably want to reduce the fat in your diet. And there are instances where people have a lot of cramping and a lot of stomach pain if they have a lot of fat. Okay, and I think that is it. I'm just looking up. Oh, right. So on the LMS page for Thursday and Friday of last week, I asked you, how does the digestive system depend on cell transport processes like diffusion? So I want you to think about that, and then obviously you've had to think about it. And the answer I'm looking for there is in the villi, you have particles of food that are in a higher concentration. Okay, so if we've got the villi, particles of food are going to be in a higher concentration. And when I'm saying particles of food, I really mean the building blocks of nutrients. So if this is the jejunum or the ileum, you've got a higher concentration, let's say, of amino acids here than here. And so they're going to diffuse inside. And I want you to be aware of that. And so then you've got your capillary. And so I remember drawing something very similar to this in your lesson. You're going to have diffusion going in there. Okay, and that's because we're going from high concentration to low concentration, and that's going to allow us to take all these amazing products of digestion and put them into our plasma, put them into our blood.